Cloud connected.
Against Mr. Jorvin. Senegal's opposition leader Ousmane Sonko, who's been in detention since Wednesday, has been charged with rape and released on bail by a court in the capital Dakar. Several hundred of his supporters, who say the charge is politically motivated, scuffled with security forces outside. Police have deployed armoured cars in the city after days of clashes in which 5 people were killed. A French schoolgirl accused of sparking a fatal online hate campaign against a teacher has admitted to lying and spreading false claims. The teacher, Samuel Paty, was beheaded last year by an Islamist militant after showing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad to a lesson on freedom of speech.
Cloud disconnected.
The girl had claimed Muslim students had been asked to leave the class, leading to a
Wi-Fi hotspot unavailable.
Angry social media campaign. The girl's lawyer says she now admits to not even being in the class. World news from the BBC. A media watchdog in Afghanistan says more than 300 women journalists and media workers have left their jobs due to security threats in the past 6 months. Almost a fifth of the total female workforce in the sector. Is Anwar Sanitirajan.
There has been a spate of targeted attacks on Afghan civil society activists, journalists and officials in recent months. Rights groups say women media workers are particularly vulnerable. Last week, 3 women working for a private TV channel were killed by gunmen in the eastern city of Jalalabad, which caused widespread outrage. A news presenter and a driver from the same channel were killed last December. Militants from the Islamic State group said they had carried out those attacks. The killings, activists say, are intended as a warning to other women not to work.
President Biden has hailed the Pope's visit to Iraq as historic and a welcome first for the country. In a statement, Mr. Biden said the meeting between Pope Francis and the influential Shia cleric Ali al-Sistani was a symbol of hope for the entire world. Iran has also welcomed the trip, which ended earlier today. A member of Germany's federal parliament has resigned after it emerged his company had profited from substantial commissions linked to the purchase of coronavirus face masks. Nicolas Löbel had already resigned from Chancellor Merkel's governing Christian Democrats over the scandal. Astronomers have analysed the most distant source of radio waves ever discovered. The source is something scientists call a radio-loud quasar, an extremely bright object which has powerful jets emitting at radio wavelengths. Researchers say it's so far away it's taken 13 billion years for its light to reach Earth, giving scientists an early glimpse of the universe when it was only 800 million years old. Quasars are found at the centre of some galaxies and are powered by huge black holes. BBC News.
Hello, welcome to OS on the BBC World Service. Carney Sharp with you today. Thanks for joining us. We will get to that TV interview in just a moment by Meghan and Prince Harry, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. There is so much to discuss. Here in the UK, it has been a topic of so much discussion on social media, on the radio, on TV, as well as politics. Also on the show, we'll be speaking to our regular coronavirus expert, Dr. Eleanor Murray in Boston. She'll talk to us about the latest COVID lines we've gathered from around the world, and we'll hear from teachers what's their experience been in and out of lockdown. But first, one story has been dominating social media feeds and news networks in the past 24 hours. Trends have included Queen Diana abolished the monarchy, and of course Harry and Meghan on Oprah. They all refer to the British royal family, and an interview aired last night in the United States by Oprah Winfrey with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Meghan told Oprah Winfrey that she found life within the British royal family so difficult that at times she didn't want to be alive anymore. The couple moved from the United Kingdom after formally stepping down from royal duties in March 2020. It was then announced last month that they would not be returning as working members of the royal family. Meghan and Prince Harry recorded the interview in California with their friend Oprah Winfrey for Harpo Productions. The Duchess also hinted at racism in the royal household, saying that when she was pregnant with her first child, Archie, There were concerns about how dark the skin of the baby might be. Take a listen.
In those months when I was pregnant, all around this same time, so we had in tandem the conversation of he won't be given security, he's not going to be given a title, and also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
What? And you're not going to tell me who had the conversation?
I think that would be very damaging to them.
That's the Duchess of Sussex speaking to Oprah Winfrey. Now, the BBC's Adine Campbell has been looking at the reaction to the story. It was one of the biggest TV events of the year, as millions of us worldwide watched the fairy tale wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. 3 years later, it's a very different story. This time, millions of people tuned in overnight to watch the couple open up to Oprah Winfrey about their lives in the royal family. It was uncomfortable viewing, with allegations of racism aimed at their son Archie. The Duchess of Sussex revealed when she was 5 months pregnant, there were conversations and concerns within the royal family about how dark their son's skin would be. Tennis star Serena Williams, one of Meghan's closest friends and also a guest at their wedding, has shown her support on Twitter. She said, "Meghan Markle, my selfless friend, lives her life and leads by example with empathy and compassion. I know firsthand the sexism and racism institutions the media use to vilify women and people of colour, to minimise us, to break us down and demonise us." But some royal biographers are not convinced by what the couple had to say, while friends of Prince Harry say it's important to be clear about what was said in the interview.
Good morning to you.
And in the States, the couple's interview is the most talked about story of the day so far. Not only talked about in the United States, but certainly here as well. That was the BBC's Adine Campbell. Now, we want to take some time on this edition of OS to reflect on some of the issues brought up by this interview. Whether you are in the public eye or not, what are some of the challenges faced by interracial couples? Just before coming on air, I spoke with 2 women on either side of the Atlantic. Jennifer Epperson is a black writer in New York. She was married to a white man. Miranda Larby is a journalist in London. She is mixed race and, like Jennifer, has also been writing about what's it like being in relationships with white men. So what was their reaction to the interview? Jennifer first.
My reaction has been it was far more significant than I anticipated going into the interview. So everyone saw the promotional clips, and it was very clear that some things would be revealed, but I just did not expect to bear witness to so much dysfunction and discomfort that both Meghan Markle and Prince Harry had to sustain during their time with the royals, and even now in the aftermath.
Miranda, you've watched clips of it, so you haven't seen the entire thing, but from the clips that you've watched and you've been on social media.
Yeah. I think Jennifer's hit the nail on the head when she says dysfunction. Like, I don't think any of us Brits have ever thought of the royal family as being a functional family, but this just kind of blows the lid off just how functional they are and how much of an anachronism I think they are to 21st century British society, given that 14% of the population don't identify as white. You would have thought, especially in London, someone like Meghan Markle looks like the classic Londoner. Like, we aren't kind of breeding, let's say, that the royal family might be used to. But I'm waiting with bated breath to watch it. But as we were kind of saying before, I don't anticipate it being a pleasant watch. I think it's going to be quite distressing to see the levels at which she kind of has been targeted by the royals and press.
Yeah, and I think, the thing about this is that a lot of people are saying that it is a family, so why not hear the levels, I suppose, as you described it, dysfunction. But some people are saying that this is just one side of the conversation. Jennifer, what do you think?
I think that it kind of reminds me of those Russian wooden dolls where you keep pulling one out of the other, and there's like another level once, every time you think that you've gotten to the bottom of it. But it was very clear watching the interview that it's not just the family, it's also the family as it relates to the firm, the institution, and then there's this kind of interesting symbiotic relationship between those parties and the British press. Yeah, it definitely seems like it is a whole system in and of itself, and it seems that either you resign to doing whatever that system asks you, but the moment that you require your own sense of agency, then it seems like that became a problem.
Miranda, were you surprised by that as a British person? Were you surprised by the details given by the Duchess of Sussex regarding the royal establishment?
No, but I would say that, okay, on the one hand, I think anyone that kind of lived through the Diana stuff, I mean, I was a child when she died, but we brought up with the kind of rumours about the way in which the firm, so to speak, treated her, and how that contributed to all the kind of really sinister stuff that happened to Diana before she died. But we don't know what goes on in the palace. Like, we can only go on hearsay and the kind of stuff that's fed out from them. So I think it's kind of difficult to say with any authority what's true or what you can be surprised by.
I want to make a little bit of a leap, not that much of a leap, but within the editorial meeting today, we were talking about the lack of support she didn't have. So sort of she focused on that lack of support within the palace, and you saw her husband, Prince Harry, with her in this context of interracial relationships. And I know that the two of you have been and are, and I myself have a white British husband. How do you think that sort of plays out when we're looking at the relationship between Meghan and Harry? Jennifer?
Yeah, I just as I wrote years ago at the onset of the royal wedding, I have really admired Prince Harry stepping up and being a vocal supporter of Meghan, calling racism out directly, so not tiptoeing around it, but calling it out directly. But yeah, as you said, as a person who has been in an interracial relationship, been in an interracial marriage, that support has to be ongoing. So whether you are a royal or just the most common person on, any given European street or American street, once you are in an interracial relationship, it's almost as if there's a third person that will always be part of that relationship, and that's public perception. And so it's not this kind of thing that you can kind of release statements every quarter, wipe your hands and feel okay. It's an ongoing effort, and it requires all parties within both families, really.
Miranda?
Yeah, I totally agree with Jennifer. I feel like you have to, as the white party in a interracial relationship, I feel like you have to accept quite a lot of responsibility for your role in that to some degree. Like, I'm mixed race, but the white boyfriends that I've had before, generally speaking, I would say that they were all quite, I don't know how to put it diplomatically, let's say they didn't take racism that seriously. So, I dated someone, for example, who used to joke that my dad wouldn't understand him when they met. And my dad was born in North London. Like, he might be of Ghanaian heritage, but he's born and bred in the UK. But my last boyfriend, he'd be quite dismissive of things like Black Lives Matter, because to him, he couldn't see racism. And, you might think, oh, well, what the hell were you doing with him? But I wrote an article which went down incredibly badly with like the far right, particularly in America, and I got sent a lot of racist abuse in terms of emails and messages. And I just said to him, look, I actually can't handle this right now. Do you mind going through and just making sure there's no actual threats? And after about 10 minutes, he was sitting there in tears and just said, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry that I never understood what you were talking about. And I think that goes to the point that a lot of white people, genuinely, it's not that they're bad, it's not that they're racist, it's that they haven't got a clue. And it takes actively being part of that and having leather in the game and like loving someone who's going through it, sometimes to make them sit up and be like, oh, actually, I do get what you mean now. And I don't know how you get around that without saying to everyone, you must be in an interracial relationship, because you think it shouldn't take having to be that close to someone, that proximity to otherness for you to understand. But it seems like sometimes that is the case.
This is OS on the BBC with Kani Shah, but we're live from London. Let's take a look at some of the other stories being worked on by my colleagues in the BBC's newsroom around the world. The British Embassy in Myanmar has tweeted in the last hours saying, "We are aware of the ongoing situation in Yangon, where security forces have reportedly surrounded civilians and are preventing people from leaving the area. We urge the security forces to allow all civilians to leave immediately without threat of violence or arrest. We will keep across developments in Myanmar and bring you them as we hear them." A series of explosions on Sunday in Equatorial Guinea is now known to have killed 31 people, officials say. The number of those injured has risen to 600. The blast hit a military base in the country's main city, Bata. Officials have blamed badly stored dynamite along with stubble burning by nearby farmers. And the European Banking Authority's email servers have been compromised in a global Microsoft Exchange cyber attack. The EU body said personal data may have been accessed from its servers, and it had pulled its entire email system offline while it assessed the damage. Now to the US. And let's return to the story of George Floyd, one that asks many questions about race relations in the country. You will no doubt remember the video footage from last May where Derek Chauvin, a white police officer with his knee pressed on the neck of George Floyd, a black man, for about 9 minutes before he died. The now former US police officer is set to face trial on second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter charges. Matt Fry is a reporter for WCC Radio, local radio station in Minneapolis, where George Floyd died, and the court case is due to be held there. Matt, welcome. Mark, welcome to the program. Let's just pick up on the delay first. There is a delay. Tell us why.
Exactly right, and thank you again for having me this morning. And the jury selection was supposed to begin this morning at around 9 o'clock. However, Judge Peter Cahill, the judge presiding in this case, delayed that selection of jurors that was supposed to begin today due to the fact that the State Court of Appeals on Friday ruled that third-degree murder charges are possible in this case. Now, those are charges that Judge Cahill dismissed last fall in this case. And the Court of Appeals ruled Friday that those charges are able to be, put against Chauvin. However, that has not been the case. And the state attorney's office prosecuting this case said, we would like to, how can you select a jury when you don't have all the charges? So they're taking a look at that and just waiting for the Court of Appeals ruling just to see, in fact, what charges there will be.
And Mark, jury selection is really important in this case. Tell us why.
Well, it is very important. A lot of the community members here are saying justice will be served through the jury. And the selection of that jury, the makeup of the jury, so important, so representative of the city of Minneapolis. There was talk prior to this court hearing getting underway of moving this out of Hennepin County, out of Minneapolis, to a place outside where community members thought the representation wouldn't be, in those communities, especially the BIPOC communities across the city of Minneapolis. So very important. There's going to be 12 jurors selected, but for now, we just have to wait and see, in fact, when that selection is going to take place.
Mark Fry, thank you very much. Mark Fry is a reporter for WCC Radio, and no doubt we'll be returning to this story tomorrow. Now let's bring in one of our regular health experts to talk through some of the main coronavirus lines of the day and to answer your questions about the pandemic. I'm joined by Eleanor Murray, Assistant Professor of Epidemiology at Boston University School of Public Health. Hi to you, Eleanor, and welcome to OS once again. I'm going to start with this. To mark 1 year of the pandemic this week, we are hearing conversations about how people's lives have been affected. Let's go back 1 year. exactly to March 2020 and the week when the World Health Organization declared the pandemic. What do you remember about that time? What were you looking at, working on?
So for me at that time, I wasn't working too much on COVID. My research focus was a little bit more on methods. And I was about to fly to DC for a conference. And I looked at, what was going on, and I thought, I'm just going to ask if I can present at this conference remotely. And I'll, think about staying home for a couple of weeks from work. And, that I think, like a lot of people, I thought, okay, after a few weeks of staying home, we'll start to see the response really tick up and everything will start to come under control. And really it just, for me, escalated, and over the next couple of weeks, the ways in which I was involved in, communicating and researching and responding to the pandemic is very much taken over a lot of what I'm doing these days.
It's one of those moments, isn't it, where we all will remember exactly where we were when the news came trickling in and when the announcement was made. What was your biggest concern at the time? What were you thinking?
So I think, for me personally, I had a background in pandemic response, but I hadn't worked in that field in many years, and so I had this kind of idea that there are these really well prepared plans. I had trained on those plans many years ago, in around 2010, and I thought these will get instituted at any point, and we'll start seeing a coordinated response. And so for me that was sort of it was this sort of feeling of waiting, like when are they going to start implementing these plans? And then as we got into March, we started to hear more information about things like, well, actually a lot of those plans have been scrapped, and stockpiles of masks and things like that had been allowed to expire or run low. And there was just this sort of dawning realization of like all this preparation that was put in place has just come to nothing, and that we have to kind of start from scratch on the response.
And isn't that interesting? Those plans were, not going according to how you as an epidemiologist would have envisaged it. When you look at where we are now, globally, we have 2.6 million deaths and more than 117 million confirmed cases. Is it something you or we could have predicted or not? With experts like yourselves, did you have a good idea as to where we might have been 1 year later or not?
So, yeah, I think that, and this was something I had even said at the time last February, when we see these newly emerging diseases, especially respiratory diseases like this, the range of possibility includes something like worldwide pandemic, like we saw with the 1918 flu. But the much more common scenario is something like we saw with SARS back in 2003, or Middle East respiratory syndrome, where there's a little bit of spread, we take some precautions to control it, and it is brought under control. And so, in February last year, I was sort of thinking, that's the scenario we're in, and, not thinking that it would be sort of once in 100 years type pandemic situation. But unfortunately, here we are.
This is so fascinating. I could talk to you about, the anniversary of this pandemic, and it's interesting in itself because there's so many reflections there. But just fast forward to one of our questions that has come in. This is from Arslan Rahat. He's our listener from Peshawar in Pakistan. He says, what is the overall chance that the variants, especially the South African variant, won't be susceptible to vaccine immunity? This is one question that comes up quite regularly.
Yeah, so there's a couple of sort of things built into this question. So one is that, the vaccines that were developed for coronavirus are so much better than we had even hoped that they would be. And so, we're seeing 95% effectiveness or efficacy from these vaccines when we were really just aiming for something like 60% or more. And so, there's a lot of room for sort of buffer there where, if some of these variants are not blocked quite as well with the vaccine is still probably going to work pretty well with them, and maybe even better than we'd initially hoped for a vaccine at all to work. So that's sort of one piece where I think, a variant would have to be very, very different to completely evade the vaccine. And if it were so different, it might, there's no guarantee that it would necessarily make us sick in the same way or spread in the same way, and all of those sort of pieces kind of coming together.
We have less than a minute, but this one is also of some concern to people. Some people have been talking about the allergic reaction to some of the vaccines. We noticed Japan has had the first case of anaphylaxis. This is very rare though, right? 30 seconds.
Yeah, so in the Pfizer trial, they recorded 20 cases of anaphylaxis, and this is why after the vaccine you have to wait for 15-20 minutes just to be checked. But it's, on the order of like 10 cases per million doses given. So it's very rare. But, you just wait for 15-20 minutes after your vaccine to make sure you're okay. Nobody seemed to have any long-term consequences.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's Dr. Eleanor Murray.
This is the BBC World Service.
These black holes are anywhere from 100 million to 1 billion times the mass of the sun. Each pair of black holes can take about 25 million years to merge.
When the truth is stranger than fiction.
I'm left wondering just what has running 246 kilometers done to these runners' bodies. A recent study of Spartathlon runners showed that just after the race, their blood samples looked similar to those of people close to death.
And where art imitates life.
We have 9 squares of antique silk. So at the top we have a training layer where we can show people how to feel something that may be wrong in the body.
Science.
It's the most extraordinary thing because it combines absolute beauty with something so scientific.
On the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Connie Sharp. Welcome to OS on the BBC World Service. Thank you for your company. We continue to host conversations each day on the impact of COVID-19 and the effect it has had on thousands of lives around the world, millions. This week, we are hearing from people who have followed an extraordinary path this past year. In a couple of minutes, we'll hear from 3 people who have continued working throughout the pandemic in supermarkets in different parts of the world at great cost to themselves.
BBC News with Julie Candler. A French schoolgirl accused of sparking a fatal online hate campaign against a teacher has admitted to lying and spreading false claims. The teacher, Samuel Paty, was beheaded last year by an Islamist militant after showing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad in a lesson on free speech. Oprah Winfrey has said it wasn't Queen Elizabeth or the Duke of Edinburgh who asked Prince Harry about the colour of his son's skin. There's been speculation about who might have made the inquiry. In the interview with Oprah Winfrey, Prince Harry and his wife Meghan said concern had been expressed by a member of the royal family. A US judge has delayed the start of the jury selection in connection with one of the most significant police trials in US history over the killing of George Floyd last May in Minneapolis. The jury selection will now begin on Tuesday for the trial of Derek Jorvin. Senegal's opposition leader Ousmane Sonko, who's been in detention since Wednesday, has been charged with rape and released on bail. Several hundred of his supporters scuffled with security forces at the courthouse. At least 31 people are now known to have been killed and more than 600 others injured in a series of explosions at a military camp in Equatorial Guinea on Sunday. State media said 3 young children have been rescued from the rubble of the buildings. The International Criminal Court has issued its highest ever reparation order, saying that child soldiers and rape victims of a convicted Congolese militia leader should have access to a total of $30 million. The money is for vocational programs for victims. A transgender woman in Bangladesh has become the first member of the community to become a television newsreader. Tashnuva Anand made history by reading her first news bulletin for a private Bengali language channel, Boishaki. BBC News.
Hello, this is OS on the BBC World Service. I'm Kani Shah. If you're just joining us, welcome to the programme. On the show, we monitor conversations taking place around the world and try to explain what is being said. We noticed on Reddit today that many are asking about what is happening in Senegal. A top official there, whose job is to settle conflicts, says that the country is at a dangerous precipice. He says it's on the verge of an apocalypse. So, what's going on? We'll try and find out more in the next 15 minutes here on OS. But first, this week marks 1 year since the pandemic was declared by the World Health Organization. A pandemic, of course, meaning the spreading of a disease or virus around the world. Throughout this week on OS, we will be bringing you conversations from people who have effectively been living on the front line of this pandemic. What is striking in our conversations this week is a theme of resilience and how people have found the strength to continue despite the challenges, the loss, the pain of the past year. Today, we will hear from supermarket workers, 3 people who have continued to work during the pandemic with great personal sacrifice. Emma is a supermarket worker here in England. Mbali works in a supermarket in South Africa. And Jimmy works in Arizona in the United States. He started by telling Nuala McGovern about how he got ill with COVID-19.
I got real sick. I got the coronavirus in something like July 1st and went to the hospital on July the 7th and didn't get out of the hospital till October 27th. Before that, it got a little hectic. We started letting a certain amount of people every 5 minutes, and we ran out a lot of paper and toilet paper, paper towels, and like Clorox wipes and all that disinfectant. We ran out of that real quick, and people were getting frustrated, but we tried to keep it in. But you know, most of all, most people where I worked at wore the mask, but certain people didn't believe it, you know, they didn't wear a mask and fought it most of the time.
Gosh, I mean, that people coming into your workspace but then not respecting the COVID regulations. I want to come back to your health in a moment, Jimmy, but I'm just wondering, Emma, some of the issues that Jimmy brings up there, you know, people panic buying or stockpiling, and also others not wearing masks. Is that something you came across?
All the time. It's been absolutely horrendous. I mean, back in sort of April, May, when things just went crazy, we had empty shelves throughout the entire store, and ours is a huge one that sells everything you need, from baby items to alcohol, all foodstuffs. And I was in tears one day when there was an elderly gentleman who just couldn't find anything to buy to eat for his dinner that day. It was horrendous. And I also agree with Jimmy about people not respecting our workplace and our safety when they come into store. It started back from over a year ago and it's still going on today. It's awful.
It boggles the mind, actually. I don't know what it is, whether it's human nature, the ugly side, should I say, of human nature. And Bali, were they some of the issues that you came up against, that people were buying up more than they needed, or indeed not being respectful to you or the staff?
Yeah, what can I say is that in the beginning, I mean, when the country went on the lockdown in March 2020, and then there were rumors that the country will run out of toilet paper because we're getting it from China and stuff like that. So people started, stocking on that. But unlike Jimmy, we did not run out of stock per se. The government kept on, telling people that, we won't run out of stuff, we won't run out of food, they mustn't buy like they are buying. But with regards to customers per se and their behaviors, at times when we have to implement the social distancing, where customers have to wait outside up until the shop is clearer, then they can still walk in. It is when you can feel that the customers were a bit agitated and a bit impatient and being rude as well. But fortunately enough, South Africa made it a point that cannot leave your own home or you can't be in a public space without any cloth mask. So in that, security personnel made sure that each and every customer that enters our supermarkets are wearing their cloth masks.
Huh. That's interesting, isn't it, Jimmy, to have security personnel to enforce mask wearing before they enter the store?
We got to the point that we would have our supervisor in front of our front door and tell them that you had to wear a mask. And then that's when we started letting, 15 to 20 people every 5 minutes. So, because people were starting to run. But our supervisor would be in front of our store and say, you gotta wear a mask. And some people would just walk away. Like, I'm not wearing one. And they'll just take off.
Emma, how do you understand it? How do you understand that behaviour? Do you understand it?
I don't understand it at all because, oh gosh, I'm trying to think when I started doing, I used to do meet and greet in the store June, July time, and when we started saying that people should wear masks in the store, I was at the door meeting and greeting saying, this is the first time, not the time back in sort of October, November, this is early on in the year. You had to let some people go through without because we couldn't force it ourselves. But no, I don't understand it. I will never understand it, and I don't understand why people can't just put a mask on properly. But what they seem to do is put it under their nose or under their chin, and I've seen customers pull their mask down, cough without putting a hand up, and pull the mask back up again. It's that bad.
I've seen that.
It's shocking.
It is. Part of me, of course, the journalist in me wants to go up and say, why are you doing that? But we kind of know that there can be, and you know more than anybody, the three of you, that can lead to aggression or confrontation or difficult situations.
We had one of the girls who was doing meet and greet back in sort of October, November, once the government had said that you have to wear a mask unless you are medically exempt. And she was shouted and screamed at. I mean, bless her, she's only in her early 20s, and she had real abuse from quite a lot of customers. Thankfully, the management went there and were observing and trying to calm the situation. But in my particular store, we haven't had constant security staff at the doors doing a meet and greet. It's been up to the workers from the checkouts or from around the store to actually go and do that. And yet, a lot of the time, and people giving us grief at the tills when we tell them that, you're only allowed to come in one at a time. Please get away from each other, socially distant. And I've had it, and people say, well, it doesn't exist. It's like, I really want to bash my head against a brick wall, or just walk away from them. It's just
very stressful.
Yes, it is, and I'm off at the moment with stress, and I'm on antidepressants because of it. It's a scary place out there, and people don't think how it affects the people who are giving you your food. It's awful. It's awful.
Emma, could you ever have predicted at the beginning of the pandemic that you would be off with stress at this point?
Could I have predicted it? Yeah. I just got worse as the time went through the year, to be honest. I wouldn't have predicted it this time last year, no, but, it's...
Sorry you're going through that.
It's
really
awful.
Sorry you're going through that. Yeah, awful.
Well, it's Jimmy. I mean, I didn't think he was going to be ill with it, like, to the extent he was.
Yeah, well, let's turn to Jimmy. I mean, when you look at your life before this pandemic and what you've been through, Jimmy, what are you thinking?
It's kind of crazy because before the pandemic, I was active. I did a lot. I just didn't have to worry about anything. But since the pandemic, I was in the hospital for 4 months. I had to learn how to walk again. I had to learn how to do everything all over again because, I was so sick and I was on a ventilator for a month. When I was working, I can honestly say, this pandemic, I still wore my mask, but I didn't like it. But, and I used to get frustrated with other people because what I used to do is I dealt with a lot of people because I'm the one that put all the liquor away, all the groceries away, and I would work from 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning till 4. So I dealt with a lot of people. I saw a lot of people didn't wear masks, and when I got sick, I still see some of my friends, and talk to them, and they still say people are not wearing masks. They're still fighting it. And like I said, I wouldn't want anybody to go what I went through. And what I went through was bad, but there's more people that they had worse than I did. I'm walking now with a cane. I'm doing everything that I can to get better. But I've never been off of work in my life as long as I've been now. I'm going crazy.
So how is your health now? So you have to walk with a cane, so it did a number on you, COVID. I know you say you were there for 4 months as well. I'm really sorry you had to go through that. Must have been very frightening for you and your family.
Yeah, you know what? It really was, honestly, it was worse on my family, especially my wife, because the doctors told my wife that I have a 10% chance of waking up. They didn't think I was going to wake up. So every day my wife was calling in, nope. And what she went through was worse than I did because I was sleeping. I don't remember nothing. I don't remember going to bed on that Monday and then waking up a month and 3 days later. I don't remember anything like that. My wife had to go through it, take care of 2 kids, a household. I can never repay that, what she had to go through. But for me, today I woke up is the day that I started realizing, whoa, what happened,
So you went to bed one day in your home and then woke up a month later in hospital.
Yeah, I lost up to 80 pounds in 4 months.
My goodness. And how are you feeling today? You mentioned the walking can be difficult.
I have it's called drop foot. I have no movement on my left side, more or less, my right foot. It's getting better every day. I went to some specialist neurologists and stuff like that. So they said that it should come back, but it might take up to 2 years.
You're young. You're just 53, if I've got that correct.
Yes, ma'am. I just thank God that I'm alive. That's the main thing. I get to see my kids grow up, and so that's the best part. But I wish people around where I live at or in the world that realize this is a real thing. I still talk to certain people, and people fight it.
Yeah, and of course, did you feel at risk when you were working? At risk of COVID?
Oh, yeah. I always believe that it was a risk, but we have to work, and I took precautions. I wore my mask. I always wore my mask. I didn't like it. Sometimes I couldn't breathe, but I wore it all the time.
The reflections there of supermarket workers, with Jimmy in the US ending that conversation. You heard from Mbali in South Africa and Emma in England, all speaking to Nuala McGovern. Carney Sharp with you on OS from the BBC World Service. We're live from London. Let's take a look at some of the stories being worked on by my colleagues. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and his wife Asma have been tested positive for the COVID-19 virus after experiencing mild symptoms, according to the presidency. A statement said they are in good health and their condition is stable, adding that they would isolate at their home for 2 to 3 weeks. Mr. Assad is 55 years old, while his wife is 45. In Germany, an MP from Angela Merkel's party has stepped down from Germany's parliament over a scandal about the purchase of face masks during the pandemic. Nicholas Löwel announced he would leave the CDU party after it emerged that his firm had earned around $300,000 from the sales. And chess player Koneru Hampi has won the BBC Indian Sportsman of the Year award for 2020 following a public vote. The 33-year-old is the world rapid chess champion, having won the title in December 2019 after a 2-year maternity break. Let's get the sports news now with Shabnam.
Thank you, Carney. The men's world #1 tennis player Novak Djokovic has been speaking exclusively to the World Service as the 18-time Grand Slam champion sets the record today for the most weeks at #1 in the 48-year history of the ATP rankings. Now, the Serb told us it's hard to say who will be the greatest men's player of all time once he, Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal are retired.
It's very difficult to enter that debate and say, who is the greatest of all time. I'm honored to be in the mix because of all the results and achievements that I have, but out of respect for the greats of our game, I don't want to speculate on that.
And you can hear Lee James' full interview with Novak Djokovic on Monday's Sport Today programme on the BBC World Service from 19:30 GMT. Two important matches in the English Premier League tonight. The fixture at Stamford Bridge could go some way to deciding who will finish in the Champions League places. Fourth place Chelsea will face Everton, who are a point behind them in fifth, having played a game less. Meanwhile, West Brom are also eyeing a top four place when they host Leeds. David Moyes' side are just 2 points behind Chelsea. And a BBC Sports study has found today on International Women's Day that the overwhelming majority of sports now do offer equal winning prize money to men and women at the top level, with cricket taking the biggest strides to narrow the gap. This summer's inaugural The 100 competition will pay both men and women the same. Of the 48 sports surveyed, the biggest gaps in prize money for female and male athletes are in football, golf and basketball. Thank you very much to Shobnam Yunus Jewel. Now, we heard from supermarket workers as part of 1 year of the pandemic coverage here on OS. A group of people who have been working throughout this pandemic are teachers, both online or in person. Today here in the UK, schools have gone back. It's the country's first step out of the second lockdown. We've been hearing of the experiences of teachers in different parts of the world.
My name is Jason Smith, and I'm an English teacher in a junior high school in Azumino, Nagano Prefecture, Japan. The last year has definitely been one to remember, that's for sure. Teaching-wise, it's been fun. I don't even know what my first-year students look like. I haven't seen them without their masks. I'm actually very worried. Japan has been luckier than most, and my neck of it even luckier. We haven't had the large outbreaks compared to the US. And while we did shut down for about a month and a half, we came back into session. We've been trying to cram everything we can into the students since they missed that month and a half. And because of Corona, we can't do things like communication activities. And I'm really worried about my kids. I'm worried that they may have missed English or liking English. And I have no idea what this is going to do to them going forward.
My name is Camilla. I work at a school in Copenhagen where I teach fourth graders, and it's quite strange to have been told for weeks now, keep your distance, stay 2 meters apart. And now I'm just in this small classroom with 28 pupils. But I have missed my pupils terribly during this lockdown, so it kind of overshines everything to just be able to be with them again. During the second lockdown, it has been particularly hard to feel how much some of the children have been struggling with virtual school. Those pupils that you would normally pull aside after lesson just to ask them how they were doing, I think they have been quite challenging to motivate and inspire at a distance. And I think I have really realized how important it is to be in close proximity to your pupils to really get a grasp on how they're doing. One of the things that has kept me going was that my pupils have had this amazing ability to reorganize to any new thing that has been thrown their way. Another thing that really lifted my spirit was that every morning during this lockdown, I have had a virtual workout with my pupils. So seeing 28 pupils doing jumping jacks and burpees on Microsoft Teams at the same time, that has been the most joyful part of the day.
Hi there, Cara Simon from South Africa, Johannesburg, speaking here. I think that in a lot of ways I have very much become used to the new normal over the last year. A lot of people will say that it was just a disaster year, and personally I can agree to a very certain extent. I think that the most difficult part would be that I had to be very conscious of when I went out, or especially being in a classroom, I wouldn't be able to simply go and visit my gran afterwards, which was very difficult because my gran and I have a very close and very strong relationship, and not being able to see her just whenever I want has been quite taxing and quite difficult. I think that in terms of teaching, having to go through the curriculum with such a speed, just to make sure that you cover the content in case a mega lockdown happens, has been also quite difficult.
Hi, my name is Sophia. I work in a high school in a town called Beit Shemesh, just of Jerusalem, Israel. My school caters for learning disabled students, as well as students with emotional, behavioral, and social difficulties, which is why we have been open and running quite regularly this past year, in accordance with the Israeli Health Ministry guidelines for schools for special needs. The fact that my school has been open has been complicated both on a professional level and on a personal level. Obviously, my students needed and still need the face-to-face communication and learning because of their special needs. However, the students, and specifically the students with behavioral difficulties, were having issues with adhering to social distancing and to mask wearing at school and out of it. Not only does this put the teaching staff in danger of getting the virus, it also created a whole new level of disciplinary issues which were at times extremely difficult to navigate. On a personal level, my family and I spent the 9 months of pandemic expecting a baby girl. We couldn't imagine that the pandemic would still be around in January 2021, and not only was it, Israel was in full lockdown as my due date drew nearer. This made teaching face-to-face even more stressful because my husband and I were worried I might be quarantined because of being with a COVID-positive student, and giving birth while quarantined was not something we wanted to happen. And obviously, the stress of actually catching the virus itself was an even more stressful possibility.
Now, a group of sailors stranded in northern Germany haven't been able to see their families for nearly 2 years because of the pandemic. 130 men from Kiribati. Our Europe correspondent Nick Beek tracked down those sailors. Take a listen.
Classic tunes from the Pacific Ocean fill the games room of a German youth hostel. A dozen sailors from the islands of Kiribati are playing pool under their national flag, a composition of white and blue waves and a golden rising sun. But this music is the closest the men have got to home in a very long time. Motua Dodo, a 31-year-old sailor, waves to his baby daughter Rinan in a video call. He's missed her birth and her first birthday, and says he just wants to hug her.
I need to chat, but now only just like this, say goodbye and some kiss in the phone. Ooh, kiss, something like that, Yeah, it's really hard, and I miss them a lot.
The sailors were about to head home after long, exhausting voyages when COVID struck. Their German shipping company flew many of the men from the Philippines to here in Hamburg, where they'd be guaranteed shelter and medical care.
Very good. No cough or sweating or anything else.
Doctors visit the youth hostel to check on the sailors, all 130 of them. Most are in good health, and none has had COVID. Their employer continues to pay their wages, and locals have offered hot food, clothes, and a warm welcome. An engineer, Aaron Tebwatia, says Germany is showing more love than his own country.
It's a great love from Germany. They bring us whatever they can. That is also why I confused. They can afford us and our government did nothing. In order to get a test.
Jorn Hiller from the German Seafarers Mission has been coordinating care for the sailors and trying to get them home. But the collection of islands between Hawaii and Australia that make up Kiribati have still suffered no COVID cases. Authorities there say they're doing what they can for their stranded citizens, but made clear to Jorn and others that they're desperate to stop anyone bringing in the virus.
Kiribati is one of the lucky countries around the world where there is no corona. So it's understandable that they do not really want to get it. On the other side, those people are away from home for 2 years and they want to go home. It is everybody's right to go home.
A highlight of the long, dragging days are the 3 meals served in the canteen. The chef says pasta, cannelloni to be precise, is the firm favourite.
We on the islands, we are more like an extended family living. Yeah?
When Captain Tekamawa Kurawa has finished his yogurt, we walk out into the crisp Hamburg air and sit down to consider the future.
To take care of everybody.
The captain, still in charge on land as he was at sea, says he fears for his men's mental health in the short term and their job prospects in the longer term.
They have to be more flexible with this pandemic. Otherwise, we will go down. We have been replaced now from our job on board, being replaced by other nationalities, and coming back, we are not sure. Goodbye.
So once again, Dodo waves goodbye to his baby.
Goodbye.
And the stranded sailor goes to sleep as his wife and daughter start their day on the other side of the world on their Pacific island.
Goodbye.
One of so many families whose lives have been turned upside down by the crashing waves of this pandemic.
And that's the BBC's Nick Beak reporting on that extraordinary story in Kiribati. Now, if you wanted to send your messages, you've been listening to supermarket workers from around the world. We also heard from teachers as well. If you want to send us your personal story on how the coronavirus has impacted you, where don't you? WhatsApp us that message +4477 3075 1925. This is OS. Stay with us.
This is the BBC World Service, where Nuala McGovern is hosting a special edition of OS Conversations.
We're hearing from people whose lives have followed an extraordinary path during the pandemic.
I work for almost a year treating patients with COVID-19. We continue fighting this fight to save as many lives as we can.
OS Conversations, Resilience During a Year of the Pandemic. Sunday at 14 GMT. Not in an hour, Outlook with Joe Fitchin.
Alex Popham was an international rugby player with a reputation for fearless tackles. At 40, he was diagnosed with early onset dementia. His neurologist linked it to repeated head trauma. We speak to Alex and his wife about how they're facing the future.
Now we return to OS, here on the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Welcome to OS on the BBC World Service with me, Carney Sharp. On this Monday, we are considering a big global story for this week. It's shining a light on attitudes around race. It is something we will ask questions on during the program. Many around the world have continued to consider what has been said in the United States with that interview by Meghan and Prince Harry about their experience in the United Kingdom. Within the royal establishment, there is a lot to unpack. One of the most striking revelations was that the Duchess saying a member of the British royal family had concerns about the colour of her unborn son's skin. Lots of you have taken to social media to discuss this. There are people giving us their opinion, but we'll try and unpick those things that have come out of the conversation. Stay with us on OS.
Hello, this is Julie Candler with the BBC News. Oprah Winfrey has said it wasn't Queen Elizabeth or the Duke of Edinburgh who asked Prince Harry about the colour of his son's skin. There's been speculation about who might have made the inquiry following the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's interview with Oprah Winfrey. Prince Harry and his wife Meghan said concern had been expressed by a member of the royal family about how dark the skin of her first baby might be. Jonathan Dibbleby, a biographer of Prince Charles, expects the royal household to respond.
I hope myself that it's not through informal statements by quote sources, but that a statement is made. I hope that it is cautious. I hope it is designed to minimise any pain and distress, but to make it clear that just as the palace does not tolerate bullying, it does not tolerate racism.
A French schoolgirl accused of sparking a fatal online hate campaign against a teacher has admitted admitted to lying and spreading false claims. The teacher, Samuel Paty, was beheaded last year by an Islamist militant after showing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad in a lesson on freedom of speech. The girl, who claimed Muslim students had been asked to leave the class, leading to a legal complaint by her father and an angry social media campaign. The girl's lawyer says she now admits to not even being in the class. The International Criminal Court has issued its highest ever reparation order, saying that child soldiers and rape victims of a convicted Congolese militia leader should have access to a total of $30 million. The ICC said the money would come from a tribunal trust fund. Holocaust reports from The Hague.
Oscar Ntanda, who was in court to hear the decision, was sentenced to 30 years in jail for murder, rape and other atrocities. Hundreds of civilians were killed and many thousands displaced by the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Those eligible for the reparation programs include victims of attacks led by the man nicknamed the Terminator, child soldiers under his command, women who were raped, and children born out of those sexual assaults.
A media watchdog in Afghanistan says more than 300 women journalists and media workers have left their jobs due to security threats in the past 6 months. They represent almost a fifth of the total female workforce in the Afghan media sector. There's been a spate of targeted attacks on civil society activists, journalists and officials in recent months. The trial of an alleged Honduran drug trafficker has started in the United States in a case that implicates Honduras' president and other top officials. Prosecutors say that President Juan Orlando Hernandez accepted millions of dollars in bribes from drug smuggling groups and used Honduran police and military officers to protect the criminals. He has repeatedly denied the accusations. World news from the BBC. A transgender woman in Bangladesh has become the first member of the community to become a television newsreader, and Prasaneti Rajan reports.
Tashnua Anna is one of those rare people from the transgender community to pursue a master's at a Bangladesh university and also to get a job. She said a daily television appearance could create a new thinking in people's minds and help other transgender people gain more acceptance in the country. Transgender people in Bangladesh are often kicked out of their homes by their families at a young age and end up living in poverty. Many of them are forced to beg for a living or turn to the sex trade or crime.
The United Nations is voicing deep concern for the fate of 200 protesters in Myanmar who've been trapped by security forces in Yangon. The UN Human Rights Office said the demonstrators had been carrying out a peaceful protest and should be allowed to leave safely without reprisals. 2 demonstrators were killed on Monday in the northern city of Michinyar when soldiers opened fire, and another was shot dead in the coastal Ayeyarwady region. More than 50 people have been killed since the military coup at the start of last month. Astronomers have analysed the most distant source of radio waves ever discovered. The source is something scientists call a radio-loud quasar. Guy Pitt reports.
This kind of quasar is an extremely bright object which has powerful jets emitting at radio wavelengths. The researchers, whose work is published in the Astrophysical Journal, say the object is so far away its light has taken 13 billion years to reach Earth, meaning it can be seen as it was when the universe was at an early stage of development, only 800 million years old. Quasars are found at the centre of some galaxies and are powered by huge black holes. The astronomers say the discovery of this one could help them understand the early universe.
BBC News.
Welcome to OS here on the BBC World Service. It's me, Connie Sharp, with you today. In a short while, in about 15 minutes or so, we'll talk about that interview that's making an international, I suppose, what can you call it, a splash, really. Lots of you commenting on that story with Meghan and Prince Harry in the United States. They've been speaking to Oprah Winfrey. There's lots to unpack there. We'll also be speaking to our coronavirus expert, Professor Manfred Green. We'll be putting your questions to him on COVID-19. But first, let's start with the ongoing situation in Myanmar. About an hour ago, the British Embassy in the country tweeted, "We are aware of the ongoing situation in Yangon, where security forces have reportedly surrounded civilians and are preventing people from leaving the area. We urge the security forces to allow all civilians to leave immediately without threat of violence or arrest. The United Nations says more than 50 people have been killed since the military detained Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi, Myanmar's democratically